Welcome to Force for Good. I'm Ketan Patel. I'm delighted to welcome you today to listen to Jean Leo. Force for Good, an organization that looks at what does it really take to transition the world from the industrial era to the information. What is the critical role of each of us as stakeholders in that transition? And it looks at some of the harder issues of why is finance not flowing? Why technology and solutions not flowing from the north to the south? And today we have Jean Leon, who has this fascinating background. He comes from the island of St. Lucia. He has a career that was built as an economist in London University. And he worked at the IMF for 25 years, then led a development bank, and now is embarked on a project which, if successful and rolled out fully as his vision dictates, it would be a development institution for the global south. Based on our conversations today, what we find is that his ideas are quite revolutionary and for today's times. Gee, welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be in Mumbai.
My pleasure to have you. You understand the model completely based on your background as an economist of risk return that investors see. Today, for the assets they could invest in the global south, they find the risk to be too high for the return. As a result, the risk-return equation, money doesn't show. What are the individual 4 or 5 elements that you think need to be changed for this to work?
Yeah, so the first key term, I think the whole concept of return needs to be reimagined from the perspective that return has to be longer horizon. Return has to be wider in scope of impact of the particular project that is being funded. And we can only do this if we embrace a systems approach to thinking about projects. We see the beginning and end in terms of outcomes. So it's return on outcomes that we should be focused on. The second, on the risk side, likewise, I think the measures of risk that exist today are equally too narrow. One, they ignore, for example, the cost to the planet of certain activities because the risk is measured strictly from a project perspective without any acknowledgement of the cost to the planet. So if we reprice that cost in terms of taking into account cost to nature, pricing nature, creating measures of the worth and value of social capital, then that equation gives us a very different dynamic, both on the return side and the cost side, and the risk that's attendant with that return.
So that's 2 of your aspects, return and risk. How will you change the conditions?
Underlying those 3 simply is that markets need to rethink systems versus partial solutions. 2, there has to be a sense of trust in the integrity of policymakers over time, beyond simple election cycles. And the third is that you must equally have a trust that the investment will yield the ability to repay and therefore reduce that risk side. If you note, I've talked of 3 elements. There's the execution, policy environment, and willingness to take that risk. So you bring markets, governments, and execution in one space. And the key word to all of those is simply structured partnerships.
Okay. There's one more element that you spoke of today, which I found fascinating. The model in investing, of course, includes leverage. It includes putting in industrial knowledge with partners who will go in and monitor and blow the whistle if something is going wrong, see if they can guide the investment because they're experts who've seen it before, to see if you can reduce the chances that it will fail. You have a different view about that. What is that?
So the issue we face is when we risk or measure risk of a project, we start from the fundamental position that capacity is fixed, capacity is exogenous. That, in my view, needs to be made endogenous. And the main reason for making it endogenous, actually are two. One is it provides for an empowerment mindset as opposed to a continuation of dependency. But equally important to the point about risk is that if capacity is inbuilt into a project, the risk of it going wrong because of this capacity failure, capacity diminishes. You end up with a win-win situation of improving your capacity through empowerment for the future, but equally reduce risk that particular project will not be executed appropriately. Yes. And therefore the risk to the investor of getting the monies back reduces, and consequently the cost will be reduced, and therefore there is more opportunity, more funding to invest in more projects, making the entirety of the cost outcome situation much more compelling going forward.
So now you're getting to the elements of the revolution. You're saying that the development organization that will serve in a model where the environment in the world has changed, politically the environment has changed. People are saying, how about me in my country rather than other countries? Yes. I need to see the return to me in my country. And you're saying that return can be delivered.
Yes.
And you're saying the financing that you might wish to give as the director of a development institution today, a newborn across the whole of the South, would be something that says, I will give you the financing if I'm really clear on the program that delivers an outcome.
Correct.
I will give it if the risk is properly priced.
Yes.
So the asset is properly priced. It's not just, for argument's sake, extraction of this iron from your country. It's the knock-on effect of that in the country too. You will change the capacity so that the country can actually deliver. That's a precondition.
Yes.
Otherwise, the risk is as it is. So the operational risk has to be transformed.
Correct.
Not by somebody external just watching it, but by capacity. Then you'll say the policy environment has to be changed.
Correct.
So there can be trust that the environment in which they invest is an environment that is integrity, that you can trust. Then you're also saying the time horizon has to be long, because for these fundamental issues, we have to have a long horizon to see things play out.
Yes.
Yes, and I missed.
Just the one point about consistency of commitment. Because we are undertaking this as a long run, it cannot be that when a government changes, the investor is left holding straws.
Yes.
So there has to be an anchor of national commitment.
Yes.
To, if anything, a thematic.
Yes.
That will generate the outcomes equally nationally determined, so that the investor from the private side sees their role as contributing, complementing what the public will provide at the same time, but with two key C words question. Coherence today,
Yes.
which means that the thing hangs as a system, and consistency over time.
Yes.
So that we know we will continue to do that which is coherent and therefore has integrity and therefore has trust, and that it will be done not as government, not as the private sector, not as activists in civil society, but as the outcome serving all three working together.
That's a tough one. We're seeing that breakdown already today. The most advanced countries.
And the reason why we have a breakdown is because we suffer from the failure of seeing the whole, and we have all devolved into fragmentation that has become egocentric or nationalistic in treating a problem that is a problem of all.
What we have seen, because I see the insight, and that last one is quite profound, because you're saying if we see ourselves individually or as countries with only its national interest, we will not serve the whole, but we will not serve ourselves either.
No.
And what we've seen in the markets in the last 3 months or so is that the markets do actually punish fragmented decisions. And actually, in some ways,
Coherence is required. It's fundamental, because without coherence, there is no degree of risk minimization. Anytime there's uncertainty, because you lack that coherence or else consistency, temporal consistency, once you miss that, you cannot have trust.
and both your C's, coherence,
Both the C's, in fact, it's three C's
together.
Yes. Flows to or through coherence and consistency.
The conversation today is very interesting. One of the things you've seen in this country is that the government introduced mass financial inclusion. So a government investment which allow the public and private sector to deliver a series of benefits to population. Some of them were social security type benefits, but many of them were financial benefits from investments where the private sector found that it could invest much more simply and clearly in the population for things like debt. It could be debt for households. It could be debt for small enterprises. It could be debt for individuals to do things. And then based on this financial inclusion model, there was enough information to figure out the risk of that. But without the government investment, the boom that we're seeing in the economy today in India could not probably have been successful or sustained. Parallels with Dr. System.
Yes, because I think it captures three of the elements that we have been discussing. The first is there was an anchor mission, which was to promote a financing ecosystem, including of quantum of money, payments, settlements, and access that was deemed to be necessary for the development of the country. The government contributed to a certain infrastructure, which then facilitated the private sector to enter and to now add layer on top of that base infrastructure to create, as it were, the map picture that can yield that ultimate mission. Immediately, you start putting in those pieces of that jigsaw, opportunities to widen, which were taken up by private sector because of opportunities and potential for return. And then the private individuals, now the households, not only benefited, but saw the benefit of that new technology, which was accepted by them. There was a certain trust which was endemic that brought the government, private sector, and households, each looking for delivery of something that they thought was important, but all contributed to building the picture of that mission that we talked about. And so the outcome of all of this, whether it was planned that way or not, is we've now developed a platform, a foundation that has spearheaded and pushed the growth of the country. But I dare say it didn't happen in 2 years or 3 years.
No, it took 10 years.
And it was not necessarily scripted to say, you do this and I do that. But the vision was clear. The anchor was there. Now individual investors seeking return, given opportunity, and the foundation of what the government did, made it all possible to create that mosaic that now has empowered the transaction space for all citizens at cost to them that would never have been imaginable if each private sector or the government had chose to do this on their own.
This is, I think,
And that's scalable. That's a scalable concept. And if we can bring this type of thinking to all of our development perspectives, then I think we have an absolute, we can share that technology, that knowledge, not only to India, but the entire developing world, the entire global south.
I think that's a fantastic way. And I think it's something the Indian government has agreed they would like to donate the technology of the rest of the world. It also illustrates why you say, don't just price a project.
Precise.
Price a program.
Precise.
And see if you can get investors to benefit from the program. And if the conditions are met into the policy, capacity building,
Trust.
we have trust,
Yes.
building the trust as a result, and partnerships.
Consistently over time and brought together in coherence, I think we have a win.
I'm delighted we could talk.
Thank you. Thank you.